self-confidence. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm grateful we can share this space together, because conversations about self-confidence are conversations about courage, resilience, and the ability to show up as our true selves. Self-confidence isn't about always feeling good. It's not about being fearless or having everything together. Self-confidence is about learning to stand tall even when we're a little unsteady. It's about being willing to embrace our imperfections and still step forward. Let go of perfection. Perfection is a myth. Embrace your imperfections. They are the places where growth happens. Perfection is a sneaky concept. On the surface, it seems like something we should all strive for: a flawless performance, a perfectly executed plan, a life with no mistakes. It's easy to believe that perfection is a prerequisite for confidence. If we can just get everything right, we'll finally feel worthy and secure. But here's the truth: perfection is a myth. And worse, it's a myth that holds us back from genuine growth and authentic confidence. When we chase perfection, we're really chasing control. We believe that if we can make everything just right, we'll protect ourselves from criticism, disappointment, and failure. But the irony is that in our pursuit of perfection, we often end up more fearful, more anxious, and more disconnected from ourselves and others. Perfection isn't a gateway to confidence, it's a barrier to it. It keeps us small, safe, and hidden. One of the most powerful lessons we can learn is that imperfections aren't flaws to be fixed, they're invitations to grow. When we embrace our imperfections, we make room for self-acceptance, resilience, and creativity. We give ourselves permission to be human, to make mistakes, to learn, and to evolve. Real confidence doesn't come from getting everything right. It comes from knowing that we can handle things even when they go wrong. Letting go of perfection requires us to challenge some deeply ingrained beliefs. We've been taught to think that being perfect will make us lovable, successful, and respected. We believe that if we can just be flawless, we'll finally feel like enough. But here's the thing: perfection is an illusion. It's a standard that no one can meet, and in striving for it, we often lose touch with who we really are. We become so focused on avoiding mistakes that we forget to live fully. There's a story I like to share about a friend who was an artist. She would spend hours, even days, obsessing over every detail of her work. She believed that her art had to be flawless to be worthy of being seen. But one day she made a mistake, a brushstroke she hadn't intended. At first she panicked. She wanted to throw the whole thing away and start over. But then something amazing happened. She decided to lean into the mistake. She let it be part of the piece, working with it rather than against it. The result was a painting that was not only beautiful but uniquely hers. That mistake became a part of her art, a mark of her authenticity. It was imperfect, and it was exactly right. In life, as in art, our mistakes, quirks, and flaws are part of what makes us who we are. When we let go of the need to be perfect, we open ourselves up to authenticity. We start to see ourselves not as projects to be perfected, but as people to be cherished. This shift doesn't happen overnight, it's a practice. Every time we resist the urge to edit ourselves, to smooth over our rough edges, we're practicing self-acceptance. And self-acceptance is the foundation of true confidence. One of the challenges of letting go of perfection is that it requires vulnerability. When we embrace our imperfections, we're exposing ourselves to the possibility of judgment. We're saying, "This is me, flaws and all." But here's the thing: the people who love us, who truly see us, don't care about our perfect facade. They connect with our humanity, our realness. When we allow ourselves to be seen as we are, we invite others to do the same. We create spaces where people feel safe to be themselves, imperfections and all. And that kind of connection is powerful. It's transformative. Letting go of perfection also means letting go of the fear of failure. When we chase perfection, we're often motivated by a fear of falling short. But failure isn't the opposite of success, it's a part of it. Every time we make a mistake, we're given an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to build resilience. Real confidence isn't about avoiding failure, it's about knowing that we can recover from it. It's about trusting that even when things don't go as planned, we'll be okay. In fact, some of the greatest moments of personal and professional growth happen when we're willing to be imperfect, when we're willing to take risks, to try new things, and to be okay with not getting it all right. This kind of courage, this willingness to embrace imperfection is what builds real, lasting confidence. It teaches us that our worth isn't dependent on our achievements or our ability to impress others. Our worth is inherent. We are valuable simply because we exist. So, how do we start letting go of perfection? By taking small steps. By giving ourselves permission to make mistakes, to be less than perfect, and to still be worthy. It might look like saying, I don't know when we're unsure, or like trying something new, even if we're not guaranteed success. It might mean asking for help when we need it or admitting when we're struggling. These are small acts of courage, but they're incredibly powerful. And the beautiful thing is that every time we choose authenticity over perfection, we build a little more self-confidence. We learn to trust ourselves not because we're flawless, but because we're resilient. We come to see ourselves as whole, complex, and perfectly imperfect human beings. Letting go of perfection doesn't mean settling for mediocrity or giving up on growth. It means embracing the messy, imperfect journey of becoming who we are. It means valuing progress over perfection, learning over performing, and connection over approval. And in this space, where we are free to be our true selves, we find a confidence that is unshakable. Stop comparing. Self-confidence doesn't come from measuring yourself against others, but from connecting to who you are. Comparison is one of the most deeply ingrained habits we have, and it's also one of the most destructive to our confidence. We live in a culture that encourages us to measure our worth by looking at everyone else, to constantly scan our surroundings and ask, am I enough? Am I as good as them? We compare our achievements, our bodies, our relationships, even our happiness to the lives of others. But here's the truth: confidence doesn't grow in the soil of comparison. It grows in the soil of self-connection and self-acceptance. Imagine this: you're at a party, talking to a friend about her latest promotion. She's excited, thriving, and as she speaks, you start to feel that familiar sinking feeling. The voice inside you says, why haven't I achieved that? What's wrong with me? Comparison creeps in, and suddenly, what should be a moment of connection becomes a moment of self-doubt. Comparison is a thief. It steals our ability to celebrate our own journey, to appreciate where we are, and to connect genuinely with others. It turns friends into rivals, successes into inadequacies, and joy into insecurity. We're so accustomed to looking outside ourselves for validation that we often forget where true confidence lies. It doesn't come from being better than others, it comes from being true to ourselves. When we let go of comparison, we free ourselves to live a life that is rooted in authenticity. We stop seeking approval and start seeking connection to ourselves, our values, and the things that make us feel alive. We stop asking, how do I measure up? And start asking, what makes me feel fulfilled? Now, letting go of comparison doesn't mean that we stop caring about growth or that we abandon our ambitions. Quite the opposite. It means that we learn to set goals that are true to who we are rather than who we think we're supposed to be. When we stop measuring ourselves against others, we start setting standards that are meaningful to us. We focus on becoming the best version of ourselves, not some idealized version we see in others. And that shift, moving from comparison to self-connection, is transformative. It allows us to pursue goals that feel genuinely fulfilling, rather than ones that look impressive on the outside but leave us feeling empty. One of the biggest sources of comparison today is social media. We scroll through highlight reels of other people's lives, seeing only the polished, perfect snapshots, and we end up feeling like our own lives don't measure up. But here's the reality: everyone has struggles. Everyone has doubts, insecurities, and days when they don't feel good enough. Social media doesn't show us the full picture, it shows us a curated version of reality. When we compare ourselves to these idealized images, we're measuring ourselves against something that isn't even real. We're setting ourselves up to feel inadequate, to believe that everyone else has it figured out, except us. But that's simply not true. So what can we do instead of comparing? One powerful practice is to cultivate gratitude. When we focus on what we have, our strengths, our unique gifts, our own journey, we begin to see that we are already enough. Gratitude shifts our perspective from scarcity to abundance. It reminds us that our worth isn't determined by external standards but by our own intrinsic value. When we're grateful, we're less likely to look at others and think, why not me? Instead, we look within and think, look how far I've come. Another tool in breaking the cycle of comparison is to set boundaries around our exposure to comparison triggers. This might mean limiting time on social media or being mindful of the people we spend time with. If we're constantly around people who make us feel less than, it's okay to set boundaries. Confidence grows when we surround ourselves with people who celebrate us, who remind us of our worth, and who encourage us to stay true to ourselves. This doesn't mean avoiding people who challenge us. In fact, healthy challenges can inspire growth. But we should be mindful of those who fuel our insecurities instead of our strengths. Comparison also loses its power when we build meaningful connections with others. When we truly connect, we stop seeing others as benchmarks or competitors. We start seeing them as fellow travelers on this messy, beautiful journey. When we lean into connection, we realize that everyone has insecurities, everyone has setbacks, and everyone has moments of doubt. We're not alone in our struggles, and that realization can be deeply freeing. Lastly, letting go of comparison is about self-compassion. When we're kind to ourselves, when we forgive ourselves for not having it all together, we build resilience. We learn that our worth isn't contingent on being the best or having what others have. It's enough to simply be who we are, where we are. Self-compassion allows us to say, I am enough, without needing to add, compared to someone else. The journey of letting go of comparison is ongoing. It's not something we do once, and for all it's a daily practice. Every time we catch ourselves comparing, we have an opportunity to redirect our attention to focus on our own path, to celebrate our own progress, and to trust that we are exactly where we need to be. Confidence doesn't mean we have to measure up. It means that we trust in our own unique journey, that we value our own growth, and that we honor our own worth. When we let go of comparison, we free ourselves to live authentically. We give ourselves permission to be enough, to be imperfect, and to be wholeheartedly ourselves. And that is where true confidence lies. Practice self-compassion. Treat yourself as kindly as you would a friend. Be patient, and forgive yourself for your mistakes. Self-compassion might sound soft or secondary when we talk about self-confidence, but it's actually one of the most powerful tools we have for building lasting self-worth. Self-compassion is the foundation of resilience, the anchor that holds us steady when we feel shaken or uncertain. When we think of confidence, we often picture people who seem bold and unshakable, who never question themselves or make mistakes. But true confidence isn't about being free from self-doubt or error. It's about knowing that we're still worthy, even when things don't go as planned. It's about being able to say, I'm human, and I'm doing my best, and that's enough. When we practice self-compassion, we offer ourselves the same kindness, patience, and understanding that we would offer a dear friend. Imagine a close friend coming to you, feeling down, doubting themselves after a mistake or a setback. What would you say to them? You'd likely say, it's okay. We all make mistakes. You're still amazing, and you'll get through this yet. When we face our own challenges, we're often much harder on ourselves. We slip into self-criticism, replay our mistakes in our heads, and convince ourselves that we should have done better. But the truth is, self-criticism doesn't make us better or more confident. It makes us feel small and afraid, shrinking our willingness to take risks or put ourselves out there. There's a myth that being hard on ourselves is a form of motivation, that if we're strict and critical, we'll somehow improve faster. But research shows that self-criticism actually weakens our motivation and resilience. When we criticize ourselves, we're less likely to try again after a failure because we fear even more self-judgment. In contrast, self-compassion creates a safe space within us, a space where we feel encouraged to learn, to grow, and to keep going, even when things get tough. Practicing self-compassion doesn't mean we ignore our mistakes or avoid accountability. It's not about giving ourselves a free pass. Instead, it's about recognizing that we can hold ourselves accountable while still treating ourselves with kindness and respect. Self-compassion allows us to say, yes, I made a mistake, but that doesn't define me. I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm committed to doing better. This approach actually strengthens our self-confidence because it creates an inner voice that supports us rather than one that tears us down. When we treat ourselves with compassion, we develop an internal ally who helps us feel worthy and capable, even when we stumble. One powerful way to cultivate self-compassion is through the practice of mindful self-talk. Many of us have an inner dialogue that is often critical, even cruel. When we notice this, we can pause and ask ourselves, would I say this to someone I care about? If the answer is no, we can consciously choose to replace those harsh words with gentler, more supportive ones. For instance, instead of saying, "I can't believe I messed that up," "I'm such a failure," we might say, "I'm disappointed, but I did my best, and it's okay to make mistakes." Over time, this shift in self-talk can profoundly change how we see ourselves and build confidence rooted in kindness rather than perfection. Another aspect of self-compassion is recognizing our shared humanity. When we're struggling, it's easy to feel isolated, as if we're the only ones who don't have it all together. But the truth is, everyone has moments of doubt, fear, and failure. We're all in this messy, beautiful, imperfect human experience together. When we remember that, we feel less alone, less burdened by our own imperfections. Self-compassion invites us to see ourselves as part of a larger whole, as one person among many who are learning, growing, and sometimes stumbling along the way. This perspective helps us to accept our flaws without shame, knowing that they're a natural part of being human. Self-compassion also involves patience. Growth isn't instantaneous, and confidence doesn't appear overnight. It's a gradual process, one that requires time, practice, and yes, mistakes. When we're kind to ourselves, we allow ourselves the space to grow without rushing the process. We learn to appreciate the journey, celebrating small victories along the way, and forgiving ourselves for the inevitable setbacks. Patience allows us to see the bigger picture, to understand that confidence is built little by little through every challenge we face with courage and every time we choose compassion over criticism. One story that always comes to mind when I think of self-compassion is about a client who was learning to play the piano as an adult. She had a lifelong love of music but had never learned to play. At first, she was excited, filled with enthusiasm, but as soon as she started making mistakes, her inner critic came rushing in. She began doubting her ability, telling herself she'd never be good enough. The joy she once felt was replaced with frustration and self-doubt. One day, her instructor said to her, "You wouldn't expect a toddler to run before they could walk. Learning takes time. Be kind to yourself and trust the process." Those words struck a chord, and from that moment, she committed to practicing self-compassion as she learned. Instead of focusing on her mistakes, she started celebrating her progress, each note, each measure, each piece learned. Slowly, her confidence grew. She realized that playing the piano wasn't just about the music, it was about the process of learning, of showing up, and of embracing the journey. By the end, she didn't just gain a skill, she gained a deeper sense of self-worth. The beauty of self-compassion is that it builds resilience. When we treat ourselves kindly, we become stronger, more capable of facing life's challenges. We stop being afraid of failure because we know we can handle it. Self-compassion becomes our safety net, the place we can return to whenever we fall. And in that space of kindness, we discover a confidence that is unbreakable, rooted in a deep and unconditional sense of self-worth. Practicing self-compassion doesn't mean that we won't still have moments of doubt or disappointment. It means that we have a steady, supportive voice within us, a voice that says, "You are enough, just as you are." And that voice, that gentle reminder, is the foundation of true, lasting confidence. Embrace vulnerability. True confidence isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to show up, imperfections and all. Vulnerability and confidence are often seen as opposites, but they're deeply interconnected. For many of us, confidence looks like strength, like being fearless and unshakable. But real confidence is far more nuanced than that. It's not about being without fear, it's about being willing to face fear head-on. It's about having the courage to step into uncertainty, to show up, to be seen, even when we don't have all the answers or guarantees. True confidence comes from our willingness to embrace vulnerability, to let others see us as we are, imperfections and all. Embracing vulnerability means letting go of the armor we wear to protect ourselves from rejection, criticism, and disappointment. It's human nature to want to guard ourselves against the things that make us feel exposed or insecure. We put up walls, hide parts of ourselves, or pretend to be what we think others want us to be. But here's the thing, those walls may keep out pain, but they also keep out connection, joy, and growth. Confidence isn't built in isolation or through perfection, it's built through connection, through shared moments of truth, and through the courage to let others in. One of the greatest myths about confidence is that it requires certainty. We think that if we're truly confident, we won't doubt ourselves, but confidence isn't about certainty, it's about trust. It's about trusting ourselves enough to take a step forward, even when we're not sure where it will lead. It's about saying, I may not have it all figured out, but I'm willing to try anyway. This willingness to embrace uncertainty and to take risks is what gives us resilience. When we stop waiting for confidence to magically appear and start moving forward in spite of our fears, we discover a strength that goes beyond certainty. Think about the times in your life when you felt most alive, most connected, most in touch with your true self. Chances are, those were moments of vulnerability. Maybe it was when you told someone you loved them for the first time, not knowing how they'd respond. Or perhaps it was when you pursued a new opportunity, even though it felt risky and uncomfortable. Vulnerability is the birthplace of courage, and it's also where confidence grows. When we step out of our comfort zones and allow ourselves to be seen, we build a confidence that isn't based on external validation. It's rooted in our own courage and authenticity. One of the challenges of embracing vulnerability is the fear of judgment. We worry that if people see our flaws, they'll reject us. But here's the paradox: the more we hide, the more disconnected we feel. The more we pretend to be perfect, the more isolated we become. Authentic confidence isn't about being universally liked or admired, it's about being real, about showing up as we are. When we embrace vulnerability, we create opportunities for genuine connection. We give others permission to be vulnerable too, to bring their whole selves into the relationship. And in that space of shared humanity, true confidence can flourish. Another fear that holds us back from vulnerability is the fear of failure. We think, what if I put myself out there and it doesn't work out? What if I'm not good enough? But here's the truth: failure is not the opposite of confidence. Failure is a part of it. Every time we fail, we learn something new about ourselves. We learn that we're resilient, that we can get back up, and that our worth isn't determined by one outcome. Embracing vulnerability means accepting that failure is a possibility, but it's not the end of the story. It's just a chapter, a stepping stone, a moment of growth. Set boundaries. Confidence isn't just about saying yes to opportunities, it's also about knowing when to say no to protect your energy and well-being. When we think about confidence, we often imagine someone who's always eager to take on new challenges, someone who says yes to every opportunity and tackles every task head-on. But a huge part of authentic confidence is the ability to set boundaries. It's having the clarity and courage to say no when something doesn't align with our values, priorities, or capacity. Setting boundaries isn't about shutting people out, it's about defining what we need in order to thrive. Boundaries are a way of protecting our energy, preserving our mental health, and ultimately building a life that honors who we are. Boundaries are essential because they help us conserve our emotional resources. Imagine you're a cup, and every task, every commitment, every favor that you take on is a little sip out of that cup. When we keep saying yes to things that deplete us, eventually that cup runs dry. We feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and often resentful. Confidence isn't about depleting yourself to please others, it's about knowing your limits and honoring them. By setting boundaries, we ensure that we have enough energy to show up fully for the things that truly matter to us. One of the biggest misconceptions about boundaries is that they're selfish or rude. Many of us were raised to believe that saying no is something we should avoid, that it's our job to keep everyone around us happy. But the truth is, boundaries are an act of self-respect and respect for others. When we set clear boundaries, we communicate honestly about what we can and cannot give. This kind of honesty is a gift. It allows us to engage in relationships and responsibilities authentically, without the resentment that often builds up when we stretch ourselves too thin. Boundaries actually strengthen our relationships because they allow us to show up with clarity, intention, and integrity. Learning to set boundaries can be challenging, especially if we're used to being people pleasers. Many of us find ourselves saying yes out of fear of disappointing others, fear of conflict, or fear of being seen as difficult. But true confidence isn't about being agreeable at all costs. It's about being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about valuing our own needs and trusting that we deserve to have them respected. Every time we set a boundary, we're practicing self-worth. We're saying, I deserve to take care of myself, and I am allowed to protect my energy. Boundaries are also crucial for maintaining balance. In a world that celebrates hustle and productivity, it's easy to feel like we should always be doing more. But confidence isn't about constant busyness, it's about discernment. It's about choosing what to engage in and what to let go of. When we set boundaries, we make room for rest, reflection, and joy. We give ourselves the time to recharge, to pursue our passions, and to nurture our relationships. Boundaries are a way of saying, I am worthy of peace, and I don't need to sacrifice my well-being to prove my worth. One powerful way to start setting boundaries is by tuning into your body and emotions. Our bodies are wise, they let us know when we're overextended, stressed, or uncomfortable. Maybe you notice a knot in your stomach when someone asks for a favor, or a sense of dread when you think about a certain obligation. These signals are important. They're your body's way of communicating your limits. When we listen to these signals and honor them, we build trust in ourselves. We begin to recognize that our needs are valid and that we don't have to ignore them to be accepted or valued. Boundary setting also requires clear and compassionate communication. Sometimes we assume that others should just know our limits, but in reality, people can't read our minds. Setting boundaries means having honest conversations, even when they feel uncomfortable. It might mean saying to a friend, I'd love to help, but I'm at capacity right now, or telling a colleague, I need to prioritize other tasks at the moment. When we communicate our boundaries with kindness, we're not only protecting our own energy but also modeling for others that it's okay to honor their own needs. One challenge of boundary setting is dealing with guilt. Many of us feel guilty when we say no, especially if we're used to being the go-to person. But here's the thing, saying no to one thing is saying yes to something else. When we set a boundary, we're choosing to invest our energy in the things that truly matter to us, whether that's our health, our family, or our passions. Confidence is about being unapologetic in our choices and trusting that we don't have to please everyone to be worthy. Boundaries allow us to focus on the things that bring us joy, purpose, and fulfillment. Boundaries also teach others how to treat us. When we consistently honor our own limits, we send a message that our time, energy, and well-being are valuable. This kind of self-respect inspires others to respect us as well. We become known as someone who is clear, reliable, and true to their word. Boundaries create a foundation of mutual respect, where we're able to give and receive support in a way that feels balanced and sustainable. There's a powerful story of a teacher who had a deep passion for helping her students, but often found herself overcommitted. She would stay late to tutor, take on extra tasks, and rarely took time for herself. Over time, her energy waned, and she found herself feeling resentful and burnt out. One day, she decided to set a boundary. She created office hours, limiting her availability for extra tasks, and began prioritizing her own well-being. At first, she worried that her students would feel let down, but what happened surprised her. Not only did her energy return, but her students respected her boundaries and even seemed to appreciate her more. By setting limits, she was able to show up with more enthusiasm and presence, creating a healthier, more balanced environment for everyone. This story reminds us that boundaries aren't barriers, they're bridges. They allow us to engage more fully, to give from a place of abundance rather than depletion. When we set boundaries, we're not closing ourselves off, we're creating the space we need to be our best selves. We're building a life that feels aligned with our values, one where we can say yes to the things that matter most. Setting boundaries is an ongoing practice, and it won't always be easy. There will be times when people push back, when guilt creeps in, or when we question ourselves. But every time we set a boundary, we're reinforcing our confidence. We're saying, I am worthy of respect. My time and energy are valuable, and in that commitment to ourselves, we find a confidence that is grounded, steady, and true. If you'd like, I can continue with the final keynote on how confidence is also built through daily actions and habits. Let me know if you'd like the full expansion. Self-confidence is not about being perfect or invincible, it's about embracing our humanity, our imperfections, and our strengths. It's about choosing to show up for ourselves every single day, even when the path feels uncertain or the fear seems overwhelming. We build confidence by making the courageous choice to be vulnerable, to trust ourselves, and to treat ourselves with kindness. It's in the daily practices of setting boundaries, cultivating resilience, and practicing self-compassion that our true confidence flourishes. Confidence isn't a destination, it's a journey. It's not something we achieve by checking off a list of accomplishments or meeting external standards of success. True confidence comes from the quiet, consistent belief that we are enough, just as we are. It's the understanding that we can handle whatever life throws our way, not because we're flawless, but because we are resilient, adaptable, and worthy of love and respect. When we choose to embrace vulnerability and let go of the need for perfection, we create space for growth, connection, and authenticity. We honor our needs, protect our energy, and step into the fullness of who we are. And by doing so, we create a foundation of confidence that is unshakable, not because it's free from fear, but because it's built on self-acceptance, trust, and courage. So let us remember that confidence is not about having all the answers or always getting it right. It's about showing up, fully and authentically, with an open heart and a willingness to keep growing. It's about trusting that, even in our struggles, we are worthy of compassion, respect, and the confidence that comes from knowing who we are. Let's choose to believe in ourselves and in the power of vulnerability, because in that space, true confidence will always be found.